The entire scheme could have worked if Sarah had not been trained to notice tiny visual details. As a graphic designer, she saw what others would miss: the blurred edges, the broken ink texture, the strange spacing between letters on the notary stamp. That one fake seal exposed everything. Her parents had crossed from family manipulation into criminal conspiracy. They thought Sarah was too tired to fight back. But the same eye she used to build her career became the weapon that saved her son from a forged custody order.
I am Sarah, 32, living in Seattle. 3 weeks after my son, Toby, arrived, social services knocked. Someone claimed I was starving him. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly it was my mother. She visited 48 hours ago, uninvited. Her real plan sat in her open bag: emergency papers signed by my father, calling me unfit. Before I explain how we destroy her scheme in court, hit like and subscribe for more family drama. Love karma stories? Drop your city in the comments. Let us rewind. I was buried in newborn exhaustion, eyes burning, shoulders aching, and my husband, Mark, had just left to teach his morning class. I was alone when the doorbell rang. My mother, Diane, marched in with cleaning supplies. Her smile was thin and icy. She claimed she was saving me from my own mess. I followed her, holding Toby. She raided my pantry, tossing my expensive formula for generic. I stared at the waste. When I confronted her, she kept scrubbing, using that condescending tone she reserved for my career. She called my freelance graphic design income unstable. I was livid. Mark and I owned our home, yet she still flaunted her luxury car. I was too tired to fight, so I held my tongue. I did not realize she was baiting me. She wanted a meltdown for her case. She told me to rest while she mopped. Walking past the dining room, I saw her huge tote bag wide open on the table. A thick folder stuck out. Dark, bold letters on the top made my breath hitch. It was one of those surreal moments that turns into a nightmare. The doorbell rang, startling Toby. I patted his back until he settled. In the kitchen, Diane was humming, playing the devoted grandma. Through the glass, I saw a pharmacy courier with her heart medication. I opened the door just a crack. I glanced back. The kitchen was quiet. I could have asked Diane to get it, but I was exhausted. Her bag sat there, zipper wide open. I told the courier to wait. I walked to the table, gauging the distance to the kitchen. Her bag smelled like heavy floor fume. My fingers brushed past her makeup and touched the rough edge of that folder. Why did I pull it? Maybe the weight felt wrong, or maybe motherly instinct kicked in. I slid it out an inch. The bold text hit me like a wool. Petition for emergency guardianship. The words barely registered. They felt alien. Emergency custody. My hands shook. I pulled the stack out and laid it on the table, shielding it from view. I flipped the cover. It was a sworn affidavit to steal my child. My breath vanished as I read. It painted me as a violent danger, twisting my postpartum blues into severe manic episodes. It claimed I had violent psychosis. I scanned the cold clinical lies. One entry said I had a hysterical breakdown last Tuesday. I remembered that day. I dropped a bottle of breast milk and cried from fatigue. Diane was there, patting my shoulder. She was not comforting me. She was documenting me. She turned my tears into proof of an unfit mother. But the bottom of the second page stopped my heart. It was a psychiatric evaluation from a doctor I had never met, complete with a blue notary seal. I am a professional illustrator. I spend 12 hours a day staring at pixels and fonts. My work demands obsessive visual scrutiny. I looked at that blue stamp. The ink did not bleed into the paper. The edges were jagged, compression artifacts. I leaned in. The spacing between the letters in the notary name was wrong. The T and R overlapped. Real stamps are uniform. This was a digital fake. My ribs felt like they had been hit. My parents had not just hired a lawyer. They had forged a state notary seal to bypass a judge. They moved from a petty family feud to felony conspiracy. I flipped the page, my breath catching. I checked for other signatures. There was my mother's loop-filled handwriting, and right below it, on the co-petitioner line, was a second name. Small, neat letters, a signature from every birthday card I ever got. My father, Bob. He even used his favorite blue gel pen. A box was checked, birth mother unfit. My quiet father had signed it. The man who bought Toby his first bear 3 weeks ago, sobbing in the waiting room when Mark said we had a healthy boy, had just signed papers to legally steal my son and lock me in a ward. He was not helpless. He was a conspirator. The betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. It burned through my fear, leaving me sharp. I could not panic. If I screamed now, they would use it as proof of my instability. I pulled out my phone, killed the sound. I held it over the folder, focusing the camera on the forged seal. He snapped photos of the fake claims and my father's signature. The mop stopped. Silence hit hard. I had seconds. I shoved the papers back exactly as they were, tucked the folder into her bag, and felt my knuckles brush something hard at the bottom. A leather book with a brass clasp. I flipped it open, and the true, terrifying scale of their plan finally clicked. My fingers brushed a cold, smooth object beneath the silk lining. It was a thick, navy leather book. I pulled it out, the spine cracking as he unlatched it. I opened the cover and stopped breathing, and a title box featured script that read Baby First Years. It was not my handwriting. The ink was a vivid plum. Those signature loops on the E belonged to my older sister Claire. My stomach dropped. Claire had not spoken to me in months. She skipped my baby shower, my texts. Yet, here was a memory book for my son, filled out in her ink. The first dated entry made my head spin. It was marked September 14th, 2 years from now. I read the words. My sweet Toby, today you turn 2. We celebrate in the garden with the string quartet you love. I blinked back tears. They were erasing me. Birth mother, unstable, poor. They were not just plotting a kidnapping. They were assassinating my identity. They wanted me gone before Toby could remember my face. My family's logic snapped into focus. Claire is 34 and has not held a job in years. She married a wealthy executive named Paul. And now her life is all country clubs and interior design. She has built an online following around her infertility struggles, posting tearful videos about the empty nursery. She treats kids like luxury accessory. Since she could not conceive, she decided to buy my child. My mother, Diane, was the courier. This made sickening sense. Mom worships money. She has always looked down on my freelance work and treats my husband Mark like a failure. She calls our home a starter house. To Diane, giving Toby to Claire was not a crime, it was a rescue mission. She thought she was saving my son from a middle-class life. By handing over, she gets to be the hero, securing a wealthy heir while punishing the daughter who would not fit her materialistic mold. I kept turning the pages. Every entry was pure delusion. Claire wrote about private preschools and ski trips to Aspen, all while pitying me as a tragic, fragile figure. My hands went numb. I looked down at Toby. He was sleeping, his chest rising and falling. He had my nose and Mark's chin. He was a piece of my soul. The idea of Claire pretending she birthed him made me want to scream. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. The mopping stopped. Diane was 20 feet away, humming, polishing the floors of the home she planned to destroy. I carefully closed the journal and tucked it back in the bag. I slid the folder in the side pocket, matching the zipper Diane left it. Exactly from the table. I stepped away from the table. My legs felt like lead, but my mind was a weapon. I needed Mark and Malene, the cutthroat attorney I met 2 years ago. If they filed that petition tomorrow, a judge would sign the order before lunch. Police would rip Toby from my arms. I had 18 hours to build a defense. I adjusted Toby, forced my breathing to slow, and walked toward the stairs. Playing the role of the tired, naive mother, I called out to kitchen, my voice steady. I told Mom I was heading up to rest. Diane's voice drifted back, dripping with fake sweetness. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding, and ducked in the nursery. I locked the door behind me. That click was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I set Toby in his crib and pulled out my phone to call Mark. My phone buzzed. I stared at the nursery door. The real war had arrived. I needed to call my husband and lawyer silently. I pressed my back against the wood. The lock clicked, a sharp metallic snap. My sanctuary. Outside. A predator was scrubbing my kitchen. He clutched my son, though tight. My hand shook. He tapped my husband, David. He taught high school history, a man of logic and quiet discipline. He never raised his voice. He was my anchor. The phone rang twice. David answered with his usual warmth. I did not say hello. I just let it out. Mark, I whispered, my voice brittle. They want Snatch Leo. My mom has forged legal papers in her bag. A crash followed, ceramic hitting tile. His favorite mug, silence. When he spoke, the mild teacher was gone. His voice was a low, guttural growl I had never heard. I am leaving now, he said. Lock the door, keep her away. The line went dead. He was already sprinting to his car. I had to move fast. A husband could not stop a fake court order. I pulled up my contacts for Sarah, a shark of an attorney who ate opposing counsel for lunch. I sent images of the fake psychiatric report and forged notary seal. I sent the custody petition with my father's fake signature. Sarah answered, sharp and ready. I cut her off. Check your email. I paced the nursery, Leo tight in my arms. The rug felt thin. I listened to Sarah clicking her mouse. Then silence. The heavy kind that precedes a storm. The silence of a pro spotting a fatal threat. Lila, she said, her voice clinical, tell me your mother does not know you found these. I confirmed my mother, Janet, was mopping downstairs, totally oblivious. Sarah exhaled. She explained the lethal mechanics of those files. Family courts move fast when a child is in danger. A judge could sign an emergency order before his coffee even cooled. The child goes first. The hearing happens later. Sarah warned me that my mother paid for a psychiat affidavit labeling me a psychotic threat. If she filed this by morning, a judge would sign an emergency order instantly. By noon, police would be at my door. They would take Leo. They would place me on a psych hold. The nursery walls seemed to close in. My parents weren't playing games. They were plotting my institutionalization. I want to march downstairs and wreck the dining room. I want to grab Janet by the throat. The primal urge to protect my baby ward. You can't confront her, Sarah ordered. Her voice was a whip. Her whole plan relies on you losing your cool. She wants you to scream. She wants you to look unhinged. If you react, she will record you and show it to a judge. She will claim you are unstable. You would hand her the evidence she needs to steal your baby. The reality of her warning felt like a suffocating blanket. I could not act on my rage. I had to become an actress. You must wear a mask, she said. No, nothing. Go back downstairs. Smile. Thank her for the cleaning. Drink her tea. Watch her drive away. Give her zero ammunition. I agreed. Sarah was clearing her schedule to build a legal fortress. I had to survive the afternoon. The call ended. I looked in the mirror. Dark circles bruised my eyes. My hair was a knot. I looked exactly like the broken target Janet described in her fake files. I took a breath. I forced my muscles to relax and practiced a soft, tired smile. It felt grotesque, like stretching synthetic skin over a skull. I had to look into a predator's eyes and act like she was a helpful grandmother. I kissed Leo's head. He smelled like warm milk. I unlocked the door. The click echoed. I stepped out, hit by the sharp scent of lemon cleaner. I placed my hand on the banister, preparing to face the woman waiting to destroy my life. I walked into the kitchen carrying a secret. Janet stood by the sink, rinsing a sponge. She looked up and flashed a smile so sickeningly sweet it made me want to gag. She squeezed the sponge. Did he finally go down, she asked, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. You look exhausted, Lila. Let me take him for the night. You need to sleep. The audacity was a physical blow. She was offering rest while plotting to lock me in a psych ward. I forced my face to stay neutral. I gave a slow nod, using my exhaustion to sell the performance. Then, tires crunched on the gravel. Mark burst through the front door minutes later. His stride was aggressive. He played the stressed husband perfectly. He threw his bag down and rubbed his temples, claiming he felt sick. Janet's face fell. The helpful grandmother routine evaporated, replaced by clear annoyance. She never liked Mark. To her, he was just a teacher preventing her daughter from accessing real wealth. She shoved her supplies in a bucket and zipped her bag. The brass teeth clicked shut over the forged papers. She gave Mark a chilly smile and left. Once her car turned the corner, the air in our house told. The place felt like a crime scene. Mark locked the door, his face pale with terror. You okay? He whispered. Is he safe? I nodded, clutching Leo, and told Mark everything. The forged seal, the fake evaluation, and that blue journal of my mother's. Mark's hands balled into fists. If she building a case, I said, my voice shaking, she must be watching me. She needs eyes inside this house. Mark didn't wait. We started tearing the place apart, moving like ghosts to keep the baby asleep. Mark checked the kitchen while I scanned the dining room, feeling under the heavy table where her bag had been. Nothing. We moved to the living room as the afternoon light cast long shadows. Mark approached the fireplace. He shifted a photo, then a cactus. He froze. He was staring at his history books because the sunlight hit them just right, casting a dark shape against the brick. In the middle of that shadow, a tiny red light pulsed. Mark reached behind a biography and pulled out a small black cube, a hidden camera. My knees gave out. I sat on the sofa holding Leo, struggling to breathe. I had nursed my son right here. I had sobbed on this rug, thinking I was alone in my own private sanctuary. I had paced this floor at 3 in the morning, singing to a fussy baby. Every private struggle of motherhood had been recorded by my own mother. We were trapped in a panopticon built by my own flesh and blood. She turned my home into an observation deck, hunting for one moment of weakness to weaponize in court. Mark stood there, analyzing the plastic device with a cold, hard stare. He pressed his thumbnail, a title fought aside, and a tiny memory card popped out. "Let's see what she's been watching," he whispered. He grabbed his laptop and sat at the dining table, the same spot where those fake papers had been just an hour before. He slid the card into port. I sat beside him, holding Leo, as the screen flickered. A folder full of video files appeared. Each one was timestamped. The first clip was from 3 days after we brought Leo home. She'd planted it on her very first visit. Mark clicked the oldest file. The footage was grainy but clear. It showed me sitting on the sofa, looking down at my sleeping newborn. We skipped through a dozen more. It was just mundane life, folding laundry, grading papers, eating cold toast. Nothing incriminating. No neglect, no psychosis, just two tired parents trying to survive. But my mother wasn't looking for reality. She was looking for a weapon. We scrolled through the list until we hit a cluster of videos from yesterday. Mark clicked one from 2:15. The room was empty until my mother walked in. She was alone. I was upstairs, and Mark was at work. She walked to the mantel with a duster. She checked her phone and started talking. Since the house was quiet, the camera caught every word. This wasn't just a custody battle anymore, it was a criminal conspiracy. The kitchen was deathly quiet, save for the laptop fan. We sat there, bathed in harsh blue screen light, waiting for the truth. Mark had organized the clips chronologically, just like his research files. Each file felt like a fresh invasion. I watched my postpartum life play out in high definition. I saw my pacing at 3 in the morning, rocking a screaming baby, collapsing in total exhaustion. A cold dread hit my stomach. The woman who birthed me had sat at home, reviewing these clips. She watched her daughter bleeding and healing. But instead of helping, she cataloged it as raw material. She hunted through my private pain, looking for a moment to twist into insanity. Mark squeezed my knee and kept clicking through the calendar until we hit yesterday afternoon. 2:15. I remembered that day. I was upstairs trying to nap while Leo slept. Barbara was downstairs, playing the role of the helpful grandmother. Mark double-clicked the file. It showed our living room. For 10 seconds, it was empty. Then Barbara strolled in, wearing a beige cardigan and humming a tune. She swiped a feather duster across our photos, then stopped. She pulled her phone out and held it to her ear. The camera was incredibly sensitive. "Ken," she said, her voice crisp. She was talking to my father. We couldn't hear his side, but we didn't need to. Her words were enough. "Yes." The doctor signed the evaluation, she said, her voice echoing. "It costs extra to lock that signature without a physical. But it is done. The paperwork is sealed. Tell Sarah to get that nursery paint by Friday. She is obsessing over paint chips, and we are out of time. We file the motion tomorrow." My chest tightened. She was talking about tearing my family apart and stealing my son, all while critiquing wall colors. She was ice cold. Barbara sighed, dripping with fake misery. "Forget the judge," she snapped. "The narrative is set. Sarah is a wreck, barely hanging on. But for this emergency order, I need a visual. Something raw." She turned toward the hidden camera, a chilling grin spreading wide. "I will slip the sedatives into her tea tomorrow morning," she said. Mike froze, his hand jerking from the trackpad. "She drinks a cup daily at 10, Barbara added, voice light and airy. "A heavy dose will knock her out cold. When the baby cries, she will not hear a thing. That is when I film the neglect. The judge will sign that emergency order by noon." The recording kept running, but we were finished. Our kitchen felt like a tomb. My ears started ringing. She wasn't just watching me. She was plotting to poison me. She meant to drug my tea and let my newborn son suffer. Just to win. Pure calculated assault. I looked at my husband. The calm teacher was gone. His jaw was locked, hands white, knuckled. A dark rage burned in his eyes. "I am calling the police," Mike muttered. His voice was a dangerous growl. He reached for his phone, but I grabbed his arm. My heart hammered, but my lawyer's advice echoed in my head. "We cannot," I whispered. Mike stared at me. She just confessed to poisoning you. Sarah, we have it on tape. I shook my head. If we call now, she will claim it was a joke. She will hire some shark to call it an illegal wiretap or just a hypothetical chat. My lawyer warned me. If we strike too early, my parents will panic. They will burn the forged documents and that fake diary. They will bury the evidence and paint us as the crazy ones. Mike closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. He understood the long game. We need them to walk into court and lie under oath. He continued. Once she files those lies, we spring the trap. We use this video to destroy them in front of the judge. Mike nodded. His rage shifted into cold, tactical focus. He began duplicating the footage, creating encrypted backups on 3 separate drives. We had our weapon, everything needed for a permanent order and a criminal case. But as the adrenaline faded, a new terror set in. Barbara intended to drug me that morning. She only failed because Mike came home sick, ruining her setup. She had packed her bag, clearly fuming. Her plan to film the neglect had failed, but a woman as ruthless as my mother would not quit. She had a deadline. She promised Olivia the baby would be hers by Friday. If the pills failed, she would move to Plan B. She needed a paper trail of danger before court opened tomorrow. I checked the microwave clock. 1:45. She could not stage the evidence herself. She would make the state do it. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Not a polite chime, a series of sharp, aggressive rings, followed by 3 heavy knocks. Mike and I shared a terrified look. The custody war had started. I stood, preparing to face the authority my mother had weaponized against me. The knocks rattled the floorboards. We just caught her planning to drug me, and now the state was at our door. He handed Leo to my husband, fixed my shirt, and opened the door. A woman stood there in a beige coat, holding a heavy clipboard. A silver badge hung around her neck. She said she was a Child Protective Services investigator. Her voice was flat and robotic. She told me they received an anonymous tip on their emergency line 30 minutes ago. The caller claimed I was hoarding weapons, suffering from postpartum psychosis, and starving my 3-week-old son. My mother, stopped by Mike coming home early, had pivoted to her backup plan. If she could not film the neglect herself, she would trick the government into doing it for her. I stepped aside, letting the investigator in. Panic hit me, but I remembered the plan. Any sign of anger or tears would be marked on that clipboard as instability. I had to be the calmest person on earth. I offered a tired, polite smile. I led her to the kitchen and offered coffee. She refused, eyes scanning the room, hunting for the chaos the tip promised. She found only peace. The kitchen smelled of lemon cleaner, ironically, the same brand my mother tried to use to frame me. I showed her the fridge. I opened the doors, revealing shelves full of fresh food, prepped meals, and organized ways of labeled breast milk. She scribbled a note. I led her upstairs to the nursery. The afternoon sun washed the yellow room in a peaceful glow. The felt stars hung motionless over the crib. Then I showed her Leo. He was awake, resting on Mike's shoulder. Leo cooed, a soft, happy sound. He was the picture of a thriving, loved baby. The investigator's professional mask softened. She asked standard questions about our routine. I answered every question with steady precision. No mention of my deadlines or Mark's job. Just the baby's checkups and feeding schedule. When we finished, the investigator went to leave, but Mark wouldn't let it slide. He cleared his throat. He asked if she dealt with retaliatory calls from angry relatives often. She froze, pen hovering. Her face tightened into a forced calm. She muttered that false reports were hard to prove. Mark stayed quiet, angling his laptop toward her. We weren't showing the hidden camera footage, yet we needed that for the judge. Instead, Mark pulled up high-res photos I took of the fake custody filing. He zoomed in on the fake seal, picking apart the pixel clones and the wrong font. He pointed to my father's signature on the document, calling me unfit. Then he clicked to photos of my sister's journal, with entries dated 2 years ahead describing my fake breakdown. Mark explained the motive. He detailed my sister's wealth, her infertility, and my mother's obsession with status. The investigator's posture slumped. Her professional mask cracked, revealing deep, genuine exhaustion. She let out a long, ragged sigh, the sound of someone realizing they were a pawn in a family war. They use us as weapons, she whispered, losing her official tone. People use this agency to settle grudges, and it steals help from children in real danger. She promised to close the file as malicious and unsubstantiated. Your son is safe here, she said, standing up. I walked her out and deadbolted the door. We survived the inspection, but the violation left me feeling hollow. My mother sent the government to tear my life apart. The adrenaline faded. My knees shook. Mark pulled me into his arms. But the silence in the house felt heavy. We survived the day. But this war was costing me everything. The sun sank, turning the sky a bruised purple. I went to close the curtains. My hand touched the fabric just as a silver sedan turned onto our street. It slowed at our mailbox. A man stepped out. He didn't move with my mother's arrogant stride. His steps were heavy and weak. It was my father, Ken. The man who signed the paper saying I was dangerous. He was the silent partner in the plot to steal my child. And he was here alone. I let the curtain drop and braced for the knock. Ken wasn't an imposing guy. For 30 years, he had been a quiet satellite orbiting my mother, mastering the art of keeping his head down. Growing up, Ken was the family shock absorber. When mother wanted a room painted, Ken worked overtime. When mother called my art a waste, Ken slid me a sketchbook, but never defended me. He trained us to walk on eggshells, pretending his cowardice was just keeping the peace. His life was a study in choosing the easiest path. Right now, that path led to my front porch. I told Mark to step back. I needed to look my father in the eye. I unlocked the deadbolt but left the chain on. A cold breeze carried his cedar afters have a smell that once meant safety, but now made my stomach churn. Lila, he began, his voice low. Your mother is just worried about you. Sweetheart, we both are. You look worn out. I said nothing. Keeping my face blank, he rubbed his neck, clearly unnerved. We just want what is best for the baby. He went on, talking faster. Things are a little unstable. Your freelance work is shaky. Mark is just a teacher. Olivia has the space and the resources. Marcus makes a great living. Maybe letting Olivia take the baby for a few months is the right move. She can afford the best care. It would be stable. I stared at him. He was trying to frame a kidnapping as a nice, helpful favor. He came here to convince his own daughter to give up her child. I let him finish his script. When he finally stopped, I locked eyes with him. You signed the affidavit. Dad, I said. My voice was cold. All the color drained from his face. He blinked, terrified. He didn't know I had seen the papers in her purse. You do not know what you mean, he stammered, taking a clumsy step back. I just came to talk. I haven't signed anything, don't lie to me. I whispered. I saw the petition. I saw the fake psych report, and I saw your signature. You used your favorite blue pen, the same one you used to brand me an unfit mother. Dad seemed to shrink. Lila, please, he begged. He claimed it was just a safety measure in case I had a breakdown. I did not even read it, he said. He authorized the legal destruction of my life without reading a word. He was ready to dump me in a ward and hand my newborn to my sister because it was easier than saying no to her. That man I grew up with. A phantom. You signed a paper claiming I was a danger to my own child. You are not a father. You are a coward. You are dead to me. I didn't wait for a reply. Watching him stand there pitiful, weak made me sick. I slammed the door. The latch clicked. I threw the deadbolt and chain, the metal thud echoing through the foyer, through the glass. I saw his silhouette on the porch. He hovered. Hand raised, then let it drop. He retreated to his sedan like a soldier from a failed war. As he backed away, his headlight swept across my living room, vanishing in the dark. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Battle lines were drawn. No more ambiguity. No more hoping for miracles. They thought they could bully a tired, vulnerable girl. They had no idea they were crossing a mother. I took a slow breath, steadying my pulse. Evan walked in, his expression one of grim understanding. He handed me my phone. The screen flashed with a relentless wave of notifications. Emboldened by my father's failure, Olivia was on the attack. A manic string of texts, dripping with entitlement. You are being selfish. One read, you can have another baby later. I have a nursery waiting. Another hit a second later. Leah deserves a life without your stress. Mom says you are falling apart. Just do the right thing and let us take over. Her delusion was staggering. She thought her husband's bank account meant she owned my child. She didn't see Leo as a human, she saw a coveted accessory she had pre-ordered. I was just the vendor refusing delivery. If you make this hard. Mom is filing papers tomorrow, she warned. The mask was off. The quiet phase of their conspiracy was over. The war had begun. My phone buzzed on the granite counter. I stood in the hall, the screen lighting up the room. Olivia had launched her assault. Since my father failed, my sister clearly decided diplomacy was a waste. She sent message after message, each one a beacon of her entitlement. I picked up devices. Walls of text filled the screen. You are being selfish, Ela. The first block read. You can have another baby when you are secure. Marcus and I are ready. Leo deserves a life without your stress. Mom says you are falling apart. Just do the right thing and let us take over. I stared at the pixels. Olivia didn't see my son as human. She saw a pre-ordered accessory, and I was the uncooperative vendor. She lived in a bubble funded by Marcus, a wealth manager who preferred his life quiet. Marcus avoided drama. Olivia lived for it. For years, she monetized her infertility online, crying in designer silk about empty rooms. Now, she believed her suffering entitled her to claim my child. Her husband's money was all the justification she needed. She thought a high tax bracket negated maternal bonds. My phone buzzed again. Another demand. If you make this difficult, Mom is filing the papers tomorrow. Do not be stupid. We will win anyway. The urge to reply burned like acid. I wanted to send something so venomous it would shatter her screen. I wanted to tell her she would never come within 100 miles of my baby. My thumbs shook with the force of my restraint. But I remembered Maline's silence was our weapon. Every unhinged text was another brick in the fortress we were building. Reacting would only feed the lie that I was unstable. I didn't reply. I pressed the buttons on my device, capturing screenshot after screenshot. The camera shutter clicked softly in the kitchen. Each image went to the secure folder Maline had set up. We had the fake evaluation. We had the forged notary seal. We had the recording of Barbara plotting a scheme. We were building an undeniable case for a permanent restraining order. But as I stood there, looking toward the room where my baby slept, a cold truth settled in. A court order wasn't enough. A piece of paper might keep them off my land, but it wouldn't satisfy the primal rage in my chest. Barbara and Olivia survived on reputation. They needed to face total, public ruin. He walked into the dining room. Evan sat hunched over his laptop. The blue light cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting his determination. My husband teaches history. He knows that wars aren't just won on physical battlefields. They are won by controlling informations and exposing the truth. Evan wasn't just saving the camera video for a judge. He was weaponizing the data. He moved through digital folders with ruthless efficiency. He stripped the raw audio and video of any metadata that could compromise our location. He uploaded the footage to a private cloud server, creating an encrypted link that couldn't be taken down. Then he began mapping out an email distribution list, methodically referencing public data and social media profiles. He found the email for the country club where Barbara held court. He located the corporate address for Marcus. Knowing the wealth firm would panic at a scandal, he dug into Olivia's footprint, finding the contact list for her infertility support group. The women who offered her sympathy were about to see her conspiracy to kidnap a newborn. Evan looked up. His eyes met mine, reflecting a shared, cold resolve. We weren't just defending ourselves in court. We were preparing to scorch the earth they walked on. The trap was set. The legal trap was set. We spent the night reviewing the timeline. My attorney Meline confirmed the morning emergency hearing. Barbara had filed her fake paperwork just as promised. The hearing was at 9 at the county courthouse. I couldn't sleep. I just laid there, listening to my baby breathe in his bassinet, counting down the hours until dawn. The night dragged on, heavy with dread. When the sun finally hit the horizon, painting the sky gold, I got up. I showered, scrubbing away 3 weeks of exhaustion. I dressed with purpose. Forget the baggy sweats. I pulled on a sharp black blazer and a crisp blouse. I slicked my hair back and applied makeup to hide the dark circles. The woman in the mirror wasn't the fragile target Barbara had described. She was a mother ready for war. Evan wore his charcoal suit, looking like the protector he is. We buckled Leo into his seat and grabbed our bag of digital evidence. The drive to downtown Cincinnati was dead silent. Morning traffic flowed around us, oblivious to our world falling apart. We pulled into the courthouse garage, the engine echo bouncing off concrete. We pushed through the heavy glass doors and cleared security. The place smelled like cheap coffee and floor wax. We found our courtroom through the maze of halls. Maline was waiting by the heavy doors with a folder. She wore a gray suit and the focused intensity of a shark. She nodded at Evan's briefcase. Everything was ready. The mass email was primed in his outbox, one click, and it was over. The door swung open. The bailiff signaled us in. The air conditioning hit like ice. I braced myself. The judge would be taking the bench any second. I glanced across the aisle, waiting for my mother to start her lies. What kind of script had she bought to justify stealing my son? Inside, the courthouse was a meat locker. We walked into the courtroom, greeted by that same wall of frigid air. It smelled like lemon wax and old paper. A sterile place where families go to break. My heels clicked on the marble. Evan walked beside me, his jaw locked tight, clutching the briefcase with our evidence inside. We found our table and sat down. Malene was already there, calm and lethal. She motioned for us to take our seats. I folded my hands to hide the shaking. Evan kept the briefcase between his feet, his grip never loosening. I forced myself to look across the room. My mother, Barbara, sat 10 feet away, though it felt like a canyon. She had curated her look perfectly for the judge. No expensive blazers today. She wore a soft beige cardigan and minimal makeup, faking a look of exhausted, heartbroken, grandmotherly grief. She sat with her spine straight, staring at the empty bench. Beside her, Ken looked sick. He was pale, sweating, and drowning in a suit 2 sizes too big. He wouldn't even look in my direction, staring only at his shoes. His cowardice was pathetic. He was just a shell. I looked past them to the gallery. Olivia was there, wearing a camel coat and holding a designer bag. She leaned forward, tracking me like a predator. She gave me a cold, venomous glare, tapping her nails on her purse. She was so smug. She really thought this was just a formality. She saw this court as a retail counter where she was waiting for a receipt. She had no idea her reputation was about to be burned to the ground. The door behind the bench opened. The bailiff announced the judge. Judge Galler entered, an older man with silver hair and eyes that had seen it all. He sat down, put on his glasses, and opened our file. The room went dead silent. Galler cleared his throat and told Barbara's lawyer to start. He wanted the justification for taking a 3-week-old infant. A man in a pinstripe suit stood up. Mr. Belmont. He buttoned his jacket and stepped into the center of the room. He didn't glance at me. He looked right at the judge. Your Honor, he began, his voice low and serious. We are here for an urgent, tragic matter. My client, Barbara Wright, is only here to save her grandson from danger, he claimed. He paced the carpet, milking the drama. He painted a picture of me as a mother falling apart. He attacked my career, calling my freelance illustration work unstable and unfit for a child. He even took shots at Evan's teaching salary, trying to make our middle-class life seem stressful. But his whole argument was built on Barbara's lies. He tapped the file. The court recognizes postpartum psychosis, he said, faking sympathy, a predator targeting a mother. My client witnessed these breakdowns for weeks. She claims I neglected my baby. He gripped Evan's hand so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, but Malene warned me. Any outburst would help him. I stayed still. Belmont held a page up, showing blue ink. We have more than a gram the fear, he declared. We have a sworn psychiatric report. A psychologist claims the mother is a danger. Belmont slammed a fake document down. He gestured to my sister. We request emergency guardianship for the maternal aunt, Clara, he announced. She has the wealth and home to keep this baby safe. We must sign this order before tragedy strikes. The room went dead silent. Judge Bennett studied the file. He knew the stakes. An ex parte order would take an infant from his mother without a hearing. The judge locked eyes with Evan. He studied my posture and tired eyes. Then he turned to my lawyer. Counselor, the judge said, his voice sharp as a blade. These are heavy allegations. A medical report naming your client a threat is significant. He peered down from the bench. Any response? I felt the room shift. The trap was set. My mother walked into court with forged papers and committed perjury to facilitate a kidnapping. Malene stood up. She had the lethal confidence of someone holding a winning hand. Your Honor, Malene said, meeting his gaze. We have proof of a felony. Malene stepped from behind the table. She held only a sleek portfolio. Her heels clicked against the marble. She reached the partition and handed a manila envelope to the bailiff. Everyone held their breath. The bailiff passed the envelope to Judge Bennett. The judge opened it and pulled out 3 high-resolution photos. One was the fake report. The second zoomed in on the notary seal. The third showed clear digital pixels. Meline cleared her throat, her voice ringing with the authority of a predator. Your Honor, she began, standing rigid. Opposing counsel present a report to take a nursing fit. My client is a pro-digital designer. She works with high-res images all day. When she saw the paperwork in the petitioner's bag, she spotted digital artifacts around that blue stamp. The judge leaned in to examine the photos. He traced the magnified image as Meline paced. She pointed out the misaligned letters. The ink did not bleed in the page. It is a digital clone, Your Honor. A fake image passed it on before printing. We checked the notary. She retired 5 years ago. This is a forgery. Belmont froze. His smugness vanished. He said nothing. He snapped his head toward my mother. His face drained of color as he realized his firm fed fake evidence to a judge. She sat paralyzed. Her beige blazer looked like a cage. Next to her, my father hung his head. Belmont tried to scramble, muttering about clerical errors. He raised his hands, seeking doubt. Meline cut him off. She pulled out a plastic bag with a small black cube Evan found behind books. Furthermore, Your Honor, Meline said, we have proof of illegal surveillance. This camera was found yesterday, right where I nursed my son. The judge stared at the cube. The room turned freezing. The judge's mask cracked, replaced by rage. Judges hate perjury, but they despise privacy violations. His eyes narrowed. He looked past my mother to her lawyer. Did your client plant recording devices in the home? The judge asked. Belmont stepped away from her, sensing the blast. Your Honor, I have no knowledge of this. I need a moment to consult my client, he whispered frantically, trying to keep her seated. He knew the danger of an open microphone, but she believed her status granted her immunity. Shoving her chair back, she stood up. The screech cut through the tension. I was gathering proof for the court, she announced. Dripping with arrogance, she pointed at my chest. She is a danger to my grandson. I did what any grandmother would do. Belmont pinched his nose, exhaling sharply. The case was dead. The silence was suffocating. Clara sat frozen. Her smug expression melted into shock. She finally realized the bill was due. My father stared at his shoes. Beside me, Evan sat still, projecting cold strength. The trap was working. Judge Bennett removed his glasses. He folded his glasses and set them on the file. He leaned forward, fingers locked. He glared at my mother with icy fury. The room went silent. The judge spoke, every word hitting like a hammer. You are admitting you broke the law to spy inside a home? She stood tall. I had to protect the child, Your Honor. The judge turned to my attorney. Counselor, he snapped, do you have the footage from this device? Meline nodded. A tiny smirk played on her lips as she pulled out the drive Evan prepared. Yes, Your Honor, we have the files. We also have audio proving her motives for this filing. The clip is ready. The judge pointed at the bailiff. Plug it in the monitor. Let's see what kind of proof she gathered. The officer hooked the drive to the console. A massive screen flickered to life. The court reporter stopped typing. Beside me, Evan didn't look up. He opened his laptop, pulled up a pre-drafted email, and checked the list. Hundreds of contacts from our family circle sat in the blind copy field. Evan kept his finger hovering over the enter key, waiting for the perfect moment. The video hit the screen. My living room appeared. Then, my mother walked into frame with a duster, playing the doting grandmother. In the back, Clara leaned forward, confused. She had no idea her mother had been filming in secret, planning to spring this fake evidence. As the plot unfolded, my mother pulled out her phone. The audio was clear, echoing off the wood. My father slumped, hearing his name. Yes, the doctor signed it. The recording said, it cost extra since there was no exam. But it is done. Make sure Clara has that nursery painted by Friday. A murmur rippled through the gallery. People there for traffic tickets watched a felony unfold. Her talk of bribery hung in the air. On screen, she turned to the lens, smiling. I will slip the sleepy pills into her tea tomorrow morning, she said. A gasp erupted. It was pure shock. She drinks a cup every day at 10. The video continued. A heavy dose ensures she sleeps. When the baby cries, she won't hear him. She will be out cold. That is when I will record the neglect. Evan didn't wait. He smashed the enter key, blasting the truth to everyone. It hit every inbox in my mother's circle, the club, the charity board, everyone. We were nuking their status. Judge Bennett didn't wait. He slammed his gavel, the crack echoing like a gunshot. Counselor, he roared, face turning crimson. Mr. Vance jumped. trembling in his designer suit. Your client isn't some sweet grandma. The judge barked, leaning in. She is a criminal. You brought fake files into my court, and we just heard a confession to assault. Vance threw his hands up. Your Honor, I swear. I knew nothing. I just used the evidence I was provided. I beat you, counselor. The judge snapped. Because if I thought you were part of a plot to drug a new mother, you would be under arrest right now. Barbara sat frozen. The mask was gone. The woman who pulled everyone's strings for years was out of moves. She was cornered. Then, a shriek ripped through the air. It was Clara. She rose in the gallery, coat falling away. She wasn't sobbing from regret. She was having a breakdown. But the nurseries is already painted. She screamed, voice cracking. We picked the wallpaper. Marcus bought the crib. She pointed at me, mascara streaking her face. It is not fair. You can't even afford a private preschool. He belongs with me. Silence filled the room. Clara just confirmed the whole scheme. She didn't care about the forgery. She only cared that her custom-ordered baby was late. The judge looked disgusted. Bailiff, he ordered, his voice cutting through her wails. Get her out of my courtroom. Now, if she resists, arrest her. Two deputy gabbed Clara. She thrashed, screaming about her nursery and her rich husband. But as they dragged her out, the secondary trap triggered. Her phone began to buzz. A steady vibration hummed through the gallery. Then my mother's phone buzzed. Then my father's jacket pocket. The blast hit its mark. Elite board members were watching the footage right now. The fallout was live. My mother stared at her phone, face turning ghost, white. She wasn't just losing custody. She was losing her entire world. The trap clicked shut perfectly. Guards shoved Clara through the doors. Her cries muffled. A rhythmic humming rose from the defense table. My mother glared at her luxury bag as the device inside rang. Then, a chorus of alerts chimed as the evidence hit every phone in the room. Evan sat beside me, the silent architect of their ruin. We both knew those pings meant the video of my mother confessing to assault was going viral among her elite circle. I pictured her club president spilling coffee in shock. I imagined my sister's husband in his office, watching his wife scream about nursery decor while plotting a kidnapping. He hated scandal. This was his nightmare. Finding out his wife was a felon would end their lavish life. He imagined the women in her group realizing their tragic. Barron's sister was actually a predator. My family watched their status evaporate. Judge Bennett ignored the phones, locking his gaze on the panicked lawyer. Vance looked ready to collapse. The judge his fingers together, casting a shadow. This court has seen dark things. Miller began, voice icy. But the sheer audacity here is the worst abuse I have ever seen. You weaponized the law to steal a child. You forged records. You plotted to drug a mother. He grabbed the petition and slashed a thick, black line across the cover, a mark of total disgust. I am denying this with prejudice, the judge declared. That was the legal kill shot. Barbara could never fight this again, but he wasn't done. He turned to Meline, my attorney, who stood with lethal grace. Counselor, Miller said, I am granting your request for a lifetime restraining order. The radius covers you, your husband, and your son. It applies to Barbara, Kenneth, and Olivia. They cannot come within 1,000 feet of your home, work, or the child's doctor. Any breach means immediate jail time. Dad slumped, burying his face in his hands. A ragged sob escaped him. The coward who spent 30 years dodging conflict finally hit a wall he could not bypass. He would never see his grandson grow up. He traded his daughter for his wife's approval, and it left him destitute. Barbara didn't cry. She stared at her bag like it held a snake. Her facade shattered. The beige cardigan suddenly looked like a prison uniform. The judge held up the silver flash drive. Catching the light, this court cannot prosecute, Miller stated, voice a low rumble. However, I have a duty to report felonies. I am ordering these exhibits sent to the district attorney before lunch. Vance flinched, stuffing pens into his briefcase. Desperate to escape the toxic fallout, he knew attorney privilege did not cover fraud on the court. He wanted no part of this. We expect felony charges filed this week. The judge continued. Forgery, perjury, conspiracy, it is all here. Get a criminal defense lawyer. Mrs. Wright, your time in family court is over, but your time in the penal system is just starting. I looked at Barbara. She met my gaze across the table. For the first time in decades, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with raw, wide-eyed fear. She built her plan on a fatal error. She thought I was weak. She saw my freelance work and my exhaustion and assumed I was a target. She never understood that a mother protecting her child possesses a strength that defies logic. She hunted a rabbit and found a wolf. I held her gaze with finality. I felt no remorse. Evan placed a steady hand on my back to guide me away. We didn't look back as we pushed through the doors. We had won. We secured our family. But a new reality loomed. The gavel fell, but the consequences of our digital strike were just manifesting. What happens when a toxic empire collapses overnight? That was 2 years ago. The doors of courtroom 4 sealed the fate of those who tried to ruin me. The system usually moves at a crawl. But when greased by irrefutable digital evidence, it spins with relentless speed. The district attorney got the files that same day. By Friday, my mother was indicted. Her high-priced lawyer saw the evidence and told her to fold, facing recordings of her plotting a chemical attack. Brenda pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. She did 6 months in a state lockup. The woman who obsessed over zip codes spent half a year on a thin mattress, eating off a metal tray. Today, Brenda is on strict probation. Her passport is gone and her life is monitored. She attends weekly check-ins, enduring the exact bureaucratic humiliation she once looked down on. The elite circle she prized exiled her the second Mark sent that email. The country club cut her membership. The wealthy friends who once attended her dinner parties now cross the street to avoid her. She is a ghost, haunting the ruins of the image she spent decades building. My father, Frank, voided prison by cooperating. The retirement funds he built for 30 years vanished into legal fees. His firm pushed him into early retirement. Corporate wanted no ties to a high-profile forgery investigation. Frank now lives in a cramped apartment. The walls are thin, and he spends his days staring at a screen. He traded his only daughter and grandson to appease a tyrant. Now the tyrant is a felon, and he is entirely alone. But the most poetic downfall was my sister. The digital shockwave hit her curated world with lethal precision. David, her banker husband, opened that link. David spent his life mitigating risk. When he watched the video of his wife plotting a kidnapping, his reaction was cold. No comfort, just lawyers. David filed for divorce and froze their accounts before the weekend was over. He locked her out of their mansion and killed her platinum credit cards. Sarah tried to pivot, seeking refuge in an online mom group. She hoped to play the victim, but 50 women in her circle had received the same video. They watched her demand my child like a packet delivery. Her support group turned into a relentless digital court. They exposed her, posting screenshots of her toxic text. Her online empire crumbled, turning her from a tragic heroine into a universal pariah. Cut off from David and with her parents in debt, Sarah faced a reality she had avoided for 34 years. She had to work. The golden child was forced to find a job with no skills and a viral scandal to her name. Today, my sister works a shift at a big box store. She wears a stiff uniform and a cheap name tag. She clocks 8 hours under bright fluorescent lights, folding shirts in a kid's clothing store. The cruel irony, she helps new moms all day, living the life she once looked down on. She heads home to a cramped apartment, feet aching and ego bruised, counting pennies for groceries. My family built a mountain of lies to steal my son and ruin me. They wanted to paint me as unstable. Instead, they just nuked their own future. Their arrogance burned their kingdom down. Now they are isolated, trapped by their own bitterness. They have zero power. They don't know where I live. They don't have my number. That restraining order is an iron wall keeping their rot away from my baby. The dust settled, leaving their wreckage behind in Denver as a monument to greed, while they sit in the mess they created. My husband and I found a brand new life. The legal fight finally ended. We walked away from the blast zone with the only thing that mattered. We sold the house and left the city of dark memories. With the villains defeated, a new question hit us. What does peace look like for a family that barely survived the first month of parenthood? Where's I, Julian, and little Toby go now that the war is over? We didn't stay in Phoenix to watch my parents' social life crumble. We sold our place in a month, packed everything into a moving truck, and drove north, putting hundreds of miles between us and those toxic people. We bought a quiet spot in rural Idaho. Our new home sits at the end of a long gravel lane, hidden by massive pines. Those trees are a natural fortress, A green wall keeping our sanctuary safe. No surprise guests here. No neighbors peering through the glass. The air smells like wet cedar and earth. It is a world away from the harsh cleaner my mother used to cover her tracks. Healing is not magic. It is just slow, steady work. For weeks, I woke up at night with my heart racing, waiting for a knock. I would check the mantle for hidden cameras. Trauma has an echo, but every day, the sound gets quieter. The quiet woods wrapped around us, giving us real peace. Without my mother's constant judgment, my freelance graphic design business took off. It didn't just survive, it exploded. I signed deals with major publishers, creating art from a sunlit studio Julian built for me, overlooking the yard. I proved every word of that fake psychiac report was a lie. I am not unstable. I am a mother who used the same sharp intuition that caught a forged document to save my child. Julian found his own path, too. He took a teaching job at a nearby school. He traded that high, stress city grind for a classroom where he can simply teach history. He is done playing soldier in an endless, shadow war. Now he comes home with chalk on his shirt and a genuine, easy smile. He was our anchor during the worst of it. Seeing him thrive here is a blessing. I am on the porch, feet pressed into warm wood. The breeze hums through the pines. My tea is finally safe, no poison, no hidden agendas across the yard. Sam is sprinting. He is not that tiny, drugged infant anymore. He is a wild 2-year-old in grass-stained jeans. His laugh rings out, bright and clear. He is chasing our new golden retriever, Buster. The dog barks, slow down just enough so Sam can tackle him, burying his face in that soft fur. It is pure, messy joy. My son has no idea about the court dates or the forged papers. He doesn't know the names of the people who tried to steal him. He will grow up under open skies, loved for who he is, not as some pawn in a game. That twisted story my sister wrote in her journal? It never happened. We replaced her lies with our reality. The door slides open. Marcus steps out, placing his hands firmly on my shoulders. His touch grounds me. He kisses my temple, and we watch Sam wrestling in the sun. We built this from nothing, stripping away the toxic weight of the past. If you are stuck with people who demand you bow down to earn their love, listen. The idea that you owe your family endless forgiveness is just a lie. It is a myth designed to keep victims silent and everyone else comfortable. Biology is not destiny. DNA does not give anyone a free pass to wreck your life or hijack your kids. I spent years confusing guilt with love, thinking I had to tolerate my parents just to keep the peace. I was dead wrong. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is necessary. Stop lighting yours on fire just to keep them warm. Real family never demands you trade yourself. Respect for a seat at the table. Walking away is terrifying. The silence feels heavy at first, but the clarity you find, it is worth it. You will realize your chosen family is stronger than any bloodline. Honestly, sometimes you just have to stop negotiating with monsters. Just step back. Let them trip their own wires and watch. You do not need to start the fire, just refuse to be the fuel. You are enough. Your safety is not a request, it is a requirement. So, I have one last thing to ask you.